Welcome to the captivating world of social psychology. Today, we're exploring one of the most fascinating aspects of human behavior: how we influence and are influenced by others. Every single day, from the moment we wake up to when we go to sleep, we're engaged in a complex dance of social interactions that shape our thoughts, feelings, and actions in ways we often don't even realize. Social psychology reveals that we are fundamentally social creatures. Our behavior changes dramatically depending on who's around us, what groups we belong to, and how we perceive our social environment. Understanding these influences can help us navigate relationships more effectively, make better decisions in group settings, and recognize when social forces might be pushing us in directions we didn't consciously choose. What makes this field so compelling is that it affects everyone, regardless of personality type. Whether you consider yourself introverted or extroverted, independent or collaborative, you're still subject to powerful social forces that have been studied and documented by researchers for decades. Let's dive into 10 of the most important social psychological phenomena that shape our daily lives. First phenomenon: conformity. Conformity is our tendency to align our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors with those around us. We have a deep psychological need to fit in and be accepted by our social groups, which often leads us to go along with the crowd, even when we privately disagree or know better. The most famous demonstration of conformity comes from Solomon Asch's line experiments in the 1950s. Participants were shown a standard line and asked to match it with one of 3 comparison lines. The correct answer was obvious, but when surrounded by actors who deliberately gave wrong answers, about 75% of participants conformed at least once, giving answers they knew were incorrect rather than standing out from the group. Conformity manifests in countless ways in modern life. Think about fashion trends, social media behavior, or workplace culture. We might find ourselves laughing at jokes we don't find funny, expressing opinions that aren't quite our own, or adopting behaviors simply because they're normal in our social circle. The power of conformity extends to serious situations as well. During the 2008 financial crisis, many investors continued buying overpriced houses because everyone else was doing it. Social media creates conformity pressure through likes, shares, and comments, influencing what we post and how we present ourselves online. Conformity isn't always negative. It helps maintain social order, promotes cooperation, and can spread positive behaviors like charitable giving or environmental consciousness. However, it can also perpetuate harmful practices, suppress innovation, and prevent individuals from expressing their authentic selves. The strength of conformity pressure depends on several factors. We're more likely to conform when the group is unanimous, when we admire or want to be accepted by the group members, when the situation is ambiguous, and when we're feeling uncertain about the correct course of action. To maintain independence while still benefiting from social connection, cultivate awareness of when you might be conforming unconsciously. Ask yourself whether your opinions and behaviors truly reflect your values, or if you're simply going along with the crowd. Seek out diverse perspectives and remember that being different isn't always wrong. Second phenomenon: social facilitation. Social facilitation is the tendency for people to perform differently when others are present compared to when they're alone. Interestingly, the presence of others can either improve or impair performance, depending on the complexity of the task and the individual's skill level. When we're performing simple or well-learned tasks, the presence of others typically enhances our performance. This is why athletes often perform better in front of crowds, why musicians may play more energetically during live concerts, and why some people find they can run faster when jogging with others. However, for complex or newly learned tasks, the presence of others often impairs performance. Students might struggle more with difficult exam problems in a crowded room compared to studying alone. Someone learning to drive might make more mistakes with passengers in the car. Public speaking anxiety demonstrates this effect perfectly. Even confident speakers can become nervous when addressing an audience. The mechanism behind social facilitation involves arousal and attention. The presence of others increases our physiological arousal, which enhances the performance of dominant responses, behaviors that are automatic or well-practiced. For simple tasks, the dominant response is usually correct, so performance improves. For complex tasks, the dominant response might be incorrect, leading to more errors. This phenomenon has practical implications for education, workplace design, and personal development. Open office plans might boost performance for routine tasks but hinder creative or complex work. Students might benefit from study groups for review but need quiet, private spaces for learning new material. Social facilitation also explains why practice conditions should match performance conditions when possible. Musicians practice in front of small audiences before major performances. Athletes train with crowd noise simulations. Speakers rehearse presentations in front of colleagues before important meetings. Understanding social facilitation can help you optimize your environment for different types of tasks. When you need to perform routine work or tasks you've mastered, being around others might boost your energy and focus. When learning something new or tackling complex problems, seek out quiet, private spaces where you can concentrate without the added pressure of social presence. Third phenomenon, groupthink. Groupthink occurs when a group's desire for harmony and consensus overrides realistic evaluation of alternatives and critical thinking. Members suppress dissent, fail to critically analyze ideas, and isolate themselves from outside opinions, often leading to irrational or dysfunctional decision-making. Psychologist Irving Janis identified groupthink while studying foreign policy disasters like the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Pearl Harbor attack. He found that highly cohesive groups often made poor decisions because they prioritized agreement over accuracy, creating an illusion of unanimity that prevented them from considering important information or alternative strategies. Groupthink has several warning signs. Members believe unquestioningly in the group's inherent morality and superiority. They stereotype outsiders as weak or evil. They pressure dissenters to conform and often appoint mind guards who shield the group from contradictory information. The group maintains an illusion of unanimity by assuming silence means agreement. Modern examples of groupthink are everywhere. Corporate boards might unanimously approve risky strategies because no one wants to be seen as disloyal. Medical teams might overlook symptoms that don't fit their initial diagnosis. Investment committees might chase market bubbles because dissenting voices are discouraged. Social media can amplify groupthink by creating echo chambers where similar opinions are reinforced and opposing views are filtered out. Online communities might become increasingly extreme as members compete to demonstrate their loyalty to group beliefs. The consequences of groupthink can be severe, leading to financial losses, missed opportunities, ethical violations, and even loss of life. The Challenger space shuttle disaster has been attributed partly to groupthink, where engineers' safety concerns were suppressed by the desire to maintain consensus and meet launch schedules. To prevent groupthink, leaders should encourage dissent and critical evaluation. Groups should actively seek outside opinions, assign devil's advocates, and create psychological safety for members to express doubts. Breaking into smaller subgroups, bringing in external experts, and establishing processes that require consideration of alternatives can all help combat the tendency toward premature consensus. Fourth phenomenon, group polarization. Group polarization is the tendency for groups to make more extreme decisions than individuals would make alone. After group discussion, initial tendencies become amplified, with groups often ending up more risky or more conservative than any individual member's initial position. This phenomenon was discovered through studies of risk-taking behavior. Researchers expected groups to make more conservative decisions than individuals, assuming that group discussion would moderate extreme positions. Instead, they found that groups often made riskier decisions than individuals, a finding initially called the risky shift. Further research revealed that groups don't always shift toward risk. They shift toward whichever direction the group initially leans. If group members start with conservative inclinations, discussion makes them more conservative. If they start with liberal inclinations, they become more liberal. The group amplifies the dominant tendency rather than moderating it. Group polarization occurs through several mechanisms. During discussion, members hear more arguments supporting the group's initial tendency than opposing it, simply because more people share the dominant view. Members also compare themselves to others and, wanting to be seen favorably, may adopt positions slightly more extreme than the group average. This phenomenon helps explain political polarization in democracies. As people increasingly sort themselves into like-minded communities, both online and offline, their political views become more extreme. Conservative groups become more conservative, liberal groups become more liberal, and the center erodes. Group polarization affects jury decisions, investment clubs, social movements, and organizational planning. Juries might impose harsher sentences than individual jurors would prefer. Investment groups might take bigger risks with collective money than members would with their personal funds. Social movements can become radicalized as committed members reinforce each other's extreme positions. The internet and social media have dramatically increased opportunities for group polarization. Online communities can bring together people with niche interests or extreme views who might never have found each other geographically. Algorithm-driven content recommendations can create feedback loops that gradually push users toward more extreme positions. To counteract group polarization, actively seek out diverse perspectives before making important group decisions. Structure discussions to ensure minority viewpoints are heard. Consider the perspectives of people outside your group. Be wary of decisions that seem too unanimous or extreme, and ask whether outside observers would view your group's conclusions as reasonable. Fifth phenomenon: diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility occurs when individuals feel less personal responsibility for outcomes when they're part of a group. The larger the group, the more responsibility gets spread around, and the less accountable each person feels for taking action or for the consequences of the group's behavior. This phenomenon helps explain many troubling aspects of group behavior. In large organizations, employees might engage in unethical practices while telling themselves they're just following orders, or that others are equally responsible. Corporate scandals often involve dozens of people who each played small roles in larger patterns of misconduct. Diffusion of responsibility also affects helping behavior, as we'll explore more deeply when discussing the bystander effect. When multiple people witness an emergency, each person assumes someone else will help, resulting in situations where no one takes action despite many potential helpers being present. The phenomenon extends to environmental issues and social problems. Climate change represents a massive diffusion of responsibility challenge. Each individual's contribution seems negligible, making it easy to assume others will solve the problem. Similarly, voting participation can suffer when people assume their single vote doesn't matter among millions. In online environments, diffusion of responsibility can lead to cyberbullying, trolling, and the spread of misinformation. When participating in large online groups, individuals may feel their personal contribution to harmful behavior is minimal and unimportant, even when the collective effect is significant. Research has shown that diffusion of responsibility can be reduced by making individual contributions more visible and identifiable. When people sign their names to decisions, take personal ownership of specific tasks, or are held individually accountable for outcomes, they're more likely to act responsibly. Groups can combat diffusion of responsibility by clearly assigning roles and responsibilities, creating systems for individual accountability, and fostering a culture where each member feels personally invested in group outcomes. Leaders can model personal responsibility and emphasize how each person's contribution matters to the overall success or failure of group endeavors. Sixth phenomenon, the bystander effect. The bystander effect is the disturbing tendency for individuals to be less likely to help someone in need when other people are present. Counterintuitively, the more potential helpers there are, the less likely any individual is to provide assistance. This occurs due to diffusion of responsibility combined with social influence processes. The bystander effect gained widespread attention following the 1964 murder of Kitty Genovese in New York City. Initial reports claimed that 38 witnesses heard her screams, but did nothing to help, though later investigations revealed the situation was more complex. Nevertheless, this case sparked extensive research into why people fail to help in emergencies. Bibb Lawtain and John Darley conducted groundbreaking experiments demonstrating the bystander effect. In one study, participants were more likely to report smoke filling a room when they were alone, 75%, than when they were with passive confederates, 10%. The presence of others who weren't reacting made participants doubt their own perceptions and assume the situation wasn't dangerous. Several psychological processes contribute to the bystander effect. First, people engage in pluralistic ignorance, looking to others for cues about how to interpret ambiguous situations. When everyone appears calm, individuals assume there's no emergency. Second, diffusion of responsibility makes each person feel less personally obligated to act. Third, evaluation apprehension makes people worry about looking foolish if they misinterpret the situation. The bystander effect isn't limited to dramatic emergencies. It affects everyday helping behavior like assisting someone who has dropped papers, offering directions to lost tourists, or intervening when witnessing harassment or discrimination. Online, it manifests as people being less likely to respond to requests for help in large forums or group chats. Understanding the bystander effect can help us become better helpers and better at getting help when we need it. If you need assistance, address specific individuals rather than making general appeals to groups. Make eye contact, point to someone, and say, "You in the red shirt, please call 911. This overcomes diffusion of responsibility by assigning clear individual responsibility. To become a more helpful bystander, remember that your action or inaction influences others. If you step forward to help, others are more likely to join you. Prepare yourself mentally for emergency situations by thinking through how you would respond. Trust your instincts. If something seems wrong, it probably is, regardless of how others are reacting. Seventh phenomenon, social loafing. Social loafing is the tendency for individuals to exert less effort when working in groups compared to working alone. When personal contributions are less identifiable and individual accountability is reduced, people often coast on the efforts of others, leading to decreased overall group performance. Max Ringelmann first documented this phenomenon in studies of rope pulling. He found that groups of people pulling a rope exerted less total force than would be expected from the sum of individual efforts. Later research by Lawtain, Williams, and Harkins demonstrated that this wasn't just due to coordination problems. People actually tried less hard when working in groups. Social loafing appears across many contexts. Students working on group projects might contribute less than they would to individual assignments. Employees in large teams might reduce their effort, assuming others will pick up the slack. Even in volunteer organizations, people might do less when they're part of large groups of volunteers. Several factors contribute to social loafing. When individual contributions can't be identified or evaluated, people feel less accountable for outcomes. Large group size increases anonymity and reduces feelings of personal responsibility. Tasks that seem unimportant or where individual contributions seem negligible are particularly susceptible to social loafing. Cultural factors also influence social loafing. Research suggests it's more common in individualistic cultures like the United States than in collectivistic cultures like China, where group harmony and collective responsibility are more strongly emphasized. However, social loafing can occur in any culture under the right conditions. Social loafing has significant implications for team management, education, and organizational productivity. Companies lose billions of dollars annually to reduce productivity in team settings. Educational group projects might fail to achieve their learning objectives if some students don't participate fully. To minimize social loafing, make individual contributions identifiable and measurable. Assign specific roles and responsibilities to each group member. Keep groups small when possible, as social loafing increases with group size. Choose meaningful tasks where each person's contribution is clearly valuable. Provide individual feedback and recognition alongside group rewards. Leaders can also foster group cohesion and shared commitment to goals, making members feel more personally invested in group success. Setting challenging but achievable goals can increase motivation, and creating accountability partnerships within larger groups can help maintain individual effort levels. Eighth phenomenon, de-individuation. De-individuation occurs when individuals lose their sense of personal identity and individual accountability, often leading to behavior that differs dramatically from how they would act when identifiable. This phenomenon typically happens in large groups, crowds, or situations where personal identity is obscured. Classic examples of de-individuation include crowd behavior at sports events, riots, religious gatherings, and online interactions where people use anonymous usernames. When people feel anonymous and unidentifiable, they may engage in behaviors they would never consider in their normal, identifiable social roles. Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment provided a dramatic demonstration of de-individuation. Students randomly assigned to play prison guards began exhibiting cruel and authoritarian behavior, while those assigned as prisoners became passive and depressed. The uniforms, roles, and institutional setting reduced their sense of individual identity and normal moral constraints. De-individuation can lead to both positive and negative outcomes. On the negative side, it can contribute to mob violence, cyberbullying, looting, and other antisocial behaviors. People in crowds might participate in activities they would find morally reprehensible as individuals. Online trolling and harassment often involve de-individuated individuals who feel protected by anonymity. However, de-individuation can also facilitate positive behaviors. Religious or spiritual experiences often involve some loss of individual identity, as people feel connected to something larger than themselves. Therapeutic group sessions can help people open up by reducing self-consciousness. Team-building activities sometimes use de-individuation techniques to help members bond and collaborate more effectively. Several factors increase de-individuation. Large group size, physical anonymity, like masks or uniforms, darkness, loud music or noise, and arousing or emotional situations all contribute to loss of individual identity. Online environments are particularly prone to de-individuation due to physical separation and often anonymous interaction. To maintain ethical behavior in potentially de-individuating situations, cultivate strong personal values and moral principles that guide behavior regardless of context. Be aware of situations where you might lose your sense of individual identity and accountability. If you notice yourself behaving differently in group situations than you would alone, pause and consider whether your behavior aligns with your true values. Organizations can prevent negative effects of de-individuation by maintaining individual accountability even in group settings, fostering personal responsibility, and creating cultures where ethical behavior is consistently reinforced regardless of group dynamics. Ninth phenomenon, Intergroup conflict. Intergroup conflict refers to tension, competition, and hostility between different social groups. This phenomenon reveals how group membership profoundly affects our attitudes and behaviors toward others, often leading to prejudice, discrimination, and conflict even when groups are formed arbitrarily. Henri Tajfel's minimal group experiments demonstrated how easily intergroup conflict can emerge. He divided participants into groups based on trivial criteria like preference for abstract art styles. Even with these meaningless distinctions, people quickly developed favoritism toward their own group and bias against the other group, allocating more resources to in-group members and viewing out-group members less favorably. Muzaffar Sharif's Robbers Cave experiment showed how competition for limited resources intensifies intergroup conflict. Two groups of boys at summer camp developed strong hostility when placed in competitive situations, engaging in name-calling, raids, and other aggressive behaviors. However, conflict was reduced when groups worked together toward shared goals that required cooperation. Intergroup conflict manifests at every level of society, from workplace departments competing for resources to international tensions between nations. Sports rivalries, political polarization, ethnic conflicts, and corporate competition all demonstrate various forms of intergroup dynamics. Several psychological processes fuel intergroup conflict. In-group favoritism leads people to view their own group more positively and treat in-group members preferentially. Out-group homogeneity bias causes people to see out-group members as more similar to each other than they actually are, reducing empathy and understanding. Social identity theory suggests that people derive self-esteem partly from group membership, motivating them to enhance their group's status relative to others. Modern technology and social media can amplify intergroup conflict by creating echo chambers where negative stereotypes about outgroups are reinforced while positive contact with outgroup members is limited. Online discussions often become more polarized and hostile than face-to-face interactions. However, research also reveals effective strategies for reducing intergroup conflict. Contact theory suggests that positive interactions between group members can reduce prejudice, especially when contact occurs between equal status individuals working toward common goals with institutional support. Superordinate goals that require cooperation from both groups can override competitive dynamics. To reduce intergroup conflict in your own life, seek out opportunities for positive contact with people from different backgrounds. Look for shared values and common goals rather than focusing on differences. Question stereotypes and generalizations about other groups. Support policies and practices that promote equality and cooperation, rather than zero-sum competition. 10th phenomenon, social exchange theory. Social exchange theory proposes that social behavior is the result of an exchange process where people seek to maximize benefits and minimize costs in their relationships. This economic model of social interaction suggests that we maintain relationships when the rewards outweigh the costs and abandon them when costs exceed benefits. Developed by George Homans and later expanded by Peter Blau, social exchange theory applies principles from economics to understand social relationships. Just as people make rational decisions about financial investments, they presumably make calculated decisions about social investments based on expected returns. In romantic relationships, social exchange theory helps explain attraction, commitment, and breakup patterns. People are attracted to partners who offer high rewards, attractiveness, status, emotional support, at low costs, time, effort, conflict. Relationships tend to be most stable when both partners feel they're receiving fair value for their investments. The theory also applies to friendships, workplace relationships, and family dynamics. Friendships often involve implicit exchanges of support, companionship, and resources. Workplace relationships may involve exchanges of information, assistance, and political support. Even parent-child relationships can be understood through exchange principles, though the costs and benefits may be less immediately balanced. Social exchange theory introduces several key concepts. Comparison level refers to the outcomes people expect from relationships based on past experience. Comparison level for alternatives considers whether better options are available elsewhere. Equity theory, a related concept, suggests that relationships are most satisfying when partners perceive fairness in the exchange of costs and benefits. However, social exchange theory has limitations. It may oversimplify the complexity of human relationships by reducing them to economic calculations. Many social behaviors appear altruistic and don't fit neatly into cost-benefit analyses. Cultural differences in collectivism versus individualism also affect how people think about social exchanges. The theory becomes more accurate when costs and benefits are broadly defined to include emotional, social, and psychological factors, not just material resources. The profit from helping others might include increased self-esteem, social approval, or alignment with personal values rather than tangible rewards. Understanding social exchange principles can help improve relationship satisfaction and social effectiveness. Be aware of what you're contributing to relationships and what you're receiving in return. Recognize that different people value different types of rewards and costs. Strive for fairness and reciprocity, while also being generous when you can afford to be. In professional settings, understanding exchange dynamics can improve networking, teamwork, and leadership effectiveness. Recognize that building social capital through helping others often pays dividends later, even when immediate benefits aren't apparent. Conclusion: navigating our social world. These 10 phenomena reveal the profound ways that social context shapes human behavior. We are not isolated individuals making purely rational decisions. We are social beings whose thoughts, feelings, and actions are constantly influenced by the presence and behavior of others. Understanding social psychology can help us become more effective in our relationships, more aware of group dynamics, and more capable of resisting negative social influences while harnessing positive ones. It can help us be better leaders, team members, friends, and citizens. The key insight from social psychology is that situation often matters more than personality in determining behavior. Good people can do bad things in bad situations, while ordinary people can become heroes when circumstances call for it. This understanding should make us more humble about our own moral certainty and more compassionate toward others who may be struggling with difficult social pressures. As our world becomes increasingly connected through technology, understanding social influence becomes even more important. Online environments create new forms of social pressure and new opportunities for both positive and negative social influence. Social media algorithms can amplify conformity, polarization, and other social phenomena in unprecedented ways. The goal isn't to become immune to social influence. That would be impossible and probably undesirable. Humans are fundamentally social creatures, and many forms of social influence help us cooperate, learn, and thrive together. Instead, the goal is to become more aware of when and how social forces are operating, so we can make more conscious choices about when to go along with the group and when to maintain our independence. By understanding conformity, we can choose when to fit in and when to stand out. By recognizing groupthink, we can foster better decision-making in our teams and organizations. By understanding the bystander effect, we can become more helpful and more effective at getting help when we need it. Social psychology reminds us that we're all connected in complex webs of mutual influence. This interconnectedness is both a responsibility and an opportunity. We have the power to influence others positively, to create more inclusive and cooperative groups, and to build stronger, more supportive communities. The journey toward greater social awareness is ongoing. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice these insights, to observe social dynamics in action, and to make choices that contribute to more positive social outcomes for everyone involved. Thank you for joining me in exploring the fascinating world of social psychology. Remember, we're all part of this grand social experiment called human civilization, and understanding how we influence each other is key to making it work better for everyone.